So I'm watching the Sting today. Um, yeah, it's about 50 years old. Not no, 47 more accurately. As of now. Yeah, and mm, I I have mixed feelings about it at best so far. Um, the one thing it does have is more slang than I've ever encountered before. Um, yeah. Seriously, so I mean, I look up a few words in every movie usually. Maybe an average of I don't know 5 words maybe. No, literally every movie. Some are just too basic, but especially old ones. Old movies tend to be like that. I mean, this is old, I guess one could say. I mean, it's supposed to be set in the 30s, so I don't know if they deliberately use older lingo as well. um, Along with the fact that it's 50 years old itself as a movie. I mean, it's supposed to be set even supposed to be set 90 years ago, but well, not quite 90, more like 80 something. Anyway, yeah, the problem here though is that not only does it use dated language, so essentially, more likely that one hasn't heard of it presently, but obviously it also obviously uses gambling slang as well. Not, well, I guess more like jargon, I suppose. I mean, they do use slang, mostly, I suppose you could say underground slang or such, uh, but also gambling jargon, and specifically card game jargon. And I I have so little knowledge about that. I mean, I've, um, I've barely heard of some games. Like, was one mentioned I've never heard of before. I mean, obviously everyone has heard of poker and such, but was one mentioned. What was it, Fair or something? I've never heard of it. Fair. I know the Egyptian one, but not the card game one. Um, yeah, so it's a bit difficult because I mean, I try to look up words as much as possible, but obviously when it comes to when they were playing the games themselves and how to play them beforehand, when they were in this room strategizing, it's very difficult to follow up. Yeah, so it's one of those movies, I suppose, where you sort of try to get the gist mostly. I don't know if I'm assuming. I mean, there are people who obviously know more about this more, and I'm assuming they could derive more enjoyment from it. I mean, ultimately, what it's really about is cheating and such, and it's not that is not technical, it's just switch and switch cards and whatnot. But so the gist ultimately is what it's about. I mean, there's so much of this, sort of sub technical stuff, not even this overall stuff. But yeah, so far, the first hour specifically was, as I said, mixed. Uh, so yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. It's a bit unbelievable to say that the person that he was looking out for, that he so wants to, that Lonigan so much wants to get exact vengeance on. Somehow, he never even got like a description of how he looks. I know this was supposed to be the era before, I guess, mobile phones could easily photograph people. But come on, I mean, they could easily give a description. And somehow, with all the henchmen he has doing stuff for him, somehow they couldn't tell him what he looks like. That is a bit unbelievable, in my opinion. I mean, he got him in his car, and somehow he still doesn't know. He's sitting just near the person that he wants to exact vengeance on. It's a bit hard to believe. And yeah, I finished it, and suppose I can sort of say why people like it, you know, in a way that I cannot see for some movies. I mean, one can sort of see when a movie is sort of, you know, I suppose similar to the conversation or such. Um, but ultimately it's still sort of mediocre. I don't know, and in my opinion, it wasn't even. I mean, it's a better movie because it doesn't rely on just brute force, but it does at some points, just not until the very end. Although, yeah, just like you said, it's nearly enough, but it's not sort of enough, for what in terms of vengeance. I know they mentioned it at one point where vengeance isn't really what I guess it's set out to be, but it's one of those things. I mean, I know that in movies they set up these situations where they create a character to be hated. I forgot what the word is now. It's sort of a but and and this is what they did obviously with Lonigan. So you just dislike him from the beginning, but just cheating him, this isn't sort of enough, is it? I mean, because he didn't just cheat others. He was vengeful himself. He was uh, deadly to apparently at least 9 or 10 people. I mean, sure. In the end, it's sort of one of those clever movies, and I suppose it's better than other movies. Just rely on brute force. But this was, I mean, maybe Flanagan was just a cheater, and not a murderer also, you know. So it didn't go. I'm not saying that they should have relied on, but I mean, this is the problem. So it's an uneven movie. It ends up being uneven. So that, sure, it's still clever with everything that happens and the movie-esque sort of nature of the whole thing, as in sort of movie within a movie in a way. And I suppose it does show how confidence is played with, how conning people works and such. Uh, but as a movie, I mean, it's not cathartic, in this, and catharsis is really the least one can expect from any movies, really. And I mean, ultimately, otherwise, it's just whatever it is. I mean, this is clearly, on average, highly rated movie. But by others, not that I suppose I should seriously not care much about movies just because that's not the point. But I do try to take approach and perceive movies on their own. But sure enough, this movie happens to belong on a list of most highly rated movies. Um, and I can see sort of why it's clever in a way, sort of as I said, similar to the conversation was clever, But I don't know. I just um, so it's rated 111 most highly rated movies right now, and sure enough, I don't I'm not trying to judge it based on what the average person already judged it in the past. But um, in terms of the top to five film in general, I mean, I suppose I got to mention it because this movie does belong on that list, and you know, there's a lot more that I like better in a way, right? But still, I mean, not a lot more. Is in, just um, I mean, there are others that are also clever, I suppose, in a way, and you know, but it doesn't quite, generalize. Like, for example, The Lives of Us. It is sort of similar in the sense that it's about spying and such. I mean, this wasn't necessarily about spying, but about, I suppose, in a way, sort of an adjacent sort of activity. That you know, is uh, calling people involves. But The Lives of Others was also a general sort of statement about society. So, in my opinion, it belongs on a highly rated list, but more than uh, this other sort of movie. Because I mean, this is more specific, I suppose. Lonergan is an individual, and he doesn't necessarily represent society at large. It is still a clever movie, but it cannot be generalized like Lives of Others can. In a way, lives of others, sort of represents, could represent any totalitarian, nation or such. And sort of, it can really readily be applied, to things like, you know, um, what Snowden revealed and such. Um, whereas that doesn't, this thing is just about, just something very specific. Um, Similar thing with Doctor Strangelove, right? It's a zany movie. I didn't think, it was best thing ever, but in terms of, I mean, it also had a bit of comedy. I mean, this thing was supposed to have a bit of comedy, but it had very, very little comedy. I mean, yeah, Strangelove here is actually, comedy is the only genre it's in for some reason. But it did have more comedy. It was a very strange sort of comedy, I gotta admit. More strange than this thing had. This thing had little bits, and it was more of, sort of like quick slapstick sort of comedy. And just running. I mean, no, the comedy wasn't its forte. I got to say, it's just not. On the other hand, I suppose one could say it is comedic the way they conned Lonergan, but it's not comedic in the sense, I mean, Strangelove was a strange sort of comedy. I could say that, and it sort of took me a while to get used to. But I certainly prefer the comedy, even if it's strange, than the just people running after each other or such. I guess it is a form of comedy, but it's very weak. Just outrunning people. Just there's not much to it. But then again, Strangelove was also sort of, could also be generalized, with regards to paranoia and uh, nuclear warfare and such. So it was better in the sense because it could be generalized, whereas this thing really was something very specific. I'm trying to compare this really to movies that are sort of similar. Obviously, it isn't exactly similar, but you know, I guess I cannot necessarily compare to animated movies or such because it's not animation. It had a few drawings, but that's the extent to it. Um, Other than that, you know, uh, strangely enough, even Three Idiots is on this list, and that's I don't know. It's another strange movie. It's supposed to be a comedy, but it had a lot of suicides, from what I remember, and I, I didn't like it that much either. It couldn't be generalized either, from what I remember, but it's just another sort of buddy movie in my opinion. So yeah, in terms of in comparison, that doesn't really there's not necessarily much better as such than this one, but um, in terms of comedy, so uh, well, it did have more comedy from what I remember, maybe a bit more. Didn't necessarily like it too much more, but it did have a bit more than this. I mean, sure, this wasn't just comedy. This was clearly more of a crime drama than a comedy. whereas Three Idiots was just a normal drama, I suppose. But I don't know. I don't necessarily like it much more, to be fair. You know? Um, but this is the thing, you know. This is this. You know, it's a very varied list. Obviously, I'm assuming just people just watch it, and you know, whoever watches it and based on their own interests, that they just simply, you know, rate the genres they like best most. I'm assuming. I'm assuming. I don't know. But you know, it has something like Amadeus, right? Sure enough, personally, you know, I like Mozart's music, so it will naturally be more liked by me. But you know, the way it was presented was so intense, so climactic. I know that this is a different sort of movie, I suppose. This wasn't about music, um, so and Amadeus wasn't about conning people. But I don't know the climax that presented. I mean, sure, both movies had climaxes. Uh, they were different, but I don't know. The climax that Amadeus presented was so much more intense, in my opinion. This was just a quick laugh, but you know, in my opinion, mediocre. I mean, sure, maybe people watched in this case, you know, comedy, crime dramas. I mean, watched quite a few of them. Maybe they came to the conclusion that this thing is one of the better ones. I personally haven't watched that many. Maybe I've watched a few more on this same list, but not exactly many more. And I still think that it's sort of mediocre, you know. Well, again, I can't quite think of sort of the best crime comedy drama, I suppose, that I've seen. Uh, I think I've liked what was it called? I think it might have been called Lady Killers. I'm not sure. So, yeah. Other than that, I mean, you know, just um, in terms of I'm not sure. I mean, what else? I mean, but this is the thing. Right? Obviously, they are all different, and you know, it's something like Requiem for a Dream. You know, sure enough, it's very different. But the way it's presented is, in my opinion, much more intense. I mean, obviously, I mean, they're both movies about obviously mature topics, but it you know I personally like this more because of the way it was presented. It was stylish, you know, whereas this was well stylish in the sense of whatever. But in my opinion, just mediocre. I don't know. I'm going for a dream, so I suppose in my opinion, does sort of deserve its average rating, possibly, maybe. I don't know. But yeah. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I do just wonder why this list exists. I mean, clearly it's a, but I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming. I mean, it is sort of. I suppose it's. I mean, IMDb is one of the most widely used. I mean, it wants to be the literally the internet database for movies. Um, but in terms of how long it's been there and how many raters there usually are, which for the top rated movies, it's usually millions. So in terms of that, I suppose I cannot say the sample size isn't too much. Um, but yeah, it does have some weird ones, I suppose. It's just not saying, the, the, yeah. All right, so there are others like something something that both apparently critics and the average rater agrees on is that Citizen Kane is on average a better film. I've only seen it once, so I cannot say. I mean, I probably missed a lot of stuff and such. My opinion, though, it seemed a bit mediocre. I mean, sure, interesting. It's still sort of mediocre. I don't know. Um, so I mean, not much different from this thing in that sense. Slightly different, but in terms of topic, it is about newspapers as opposed to yeah. But I'm just saying, that some of the some on this list are just Slightly better, slightly worse, in my opinion, than the average rating indicates. You know, this is why I don't try to, perceive them all. Obviously, if they're on this list, then I would have known that they're on this list. So something like I can just simply forget that they're on this list when I watch them. Anyway, there's the inevitably there could be some sort of prejudgment of issues, but yeah. Something somewhat similar though, is A Clockwork Orange, right? In terms of might well, it doesn't have too much comedy either. Um, no, its genres are sci-fi and crime drama. Uh, but what crime is, I guess, the similarity here. But this is the thing, right? I mean, sure, I suppose this is because sci-fi is involved. But I thought, even in terms of presentation, it was so much more vivacious. Whereas, well, this thing was about, yeah, a 1920s, or, yeah, no, it's said 37, yeah, it's supposed to be 737. So, I mean, I'm assuming they did create an environment, I'm assuming. But, this is the thing that makes me sort of want to rate something higher. So, how unique it is and such, how unique it looks, how unique the plot is. So yeah, the plot of this thing is sort of clever. You cannot just have that in my opinion. Other than that, well, you just simply try to. This is why I end up rating sci-fi higher, I suppose, because it's usually unique, usually looks interesting. So in my opinion, that translates into a higher average rating. That is, my rating. Um, Yeah, something similar though that I have watched in the past is Snatch. Is also a comedy crime. Literally, just so very similar in the sense, and well, yeah, this is supposed to be a drama as well. This thing, um, and I didn't necessarily like Snatch so much more. Yeah. They seem to be rated fairly similarly. I mean, there's Snatch is 104, Sting is 101. Um, I didn't necessarily think either one of them had too much comedy. Sure enough, they had crime, but So anyway, I think we can conclude that everyone's perception of movies is subjective, I suppose. So from what I remember from Snatch, the only thing that seemed to be funny and interesting is yeah, Brad Pitt's performance. The way he spoke, I mean, barely could be understood. But um, other than that, though, I mean, it wasn't like, something that makes me say wow was such. It wasn't unique either looks or necessarily plot. Um, so I might have liked it a bit better, apparently based on the rating I gave it. It's been a while ago, so I don't quite remember why specifically, but they're both fairly similar, I think, in my opinion. I mean, they I suppose even in the average rating here seems like, but all the movies on this list are on average rated fairly high. So the movie at the 250 spot, which right now is PK, which I've also seen, has 8 as an average rating. Even that, in my opinion, was a bit higher. I mean, I rated it 7 personally, so I still thought it was fairly interesting. It it was, but I don't know. 8, in my opinion, is something that is even beyond. I don't know, just something But in terms of the unique plot as such, an alien on Earth that loses the only device can use to communicate with his spaceship. That's a good start as a synopsis. It say this thing didn't have that as a synopsis. I mean, this isn't even a fantasy. It says so. I suppose this thing wasn't fantasy. But I'm just trying to think about what exactly gets people to rate these things. I'm assuming they're not all rated the same by the same people. But considering the fact that they belong on the same list, obviously makes you know would end up making them seen by the same people. So it's still a bit weird that they're all because my top 250 list has a variety of ratings, from I think 4 to 10. So it's a bit strange, uh, that seeing that listed more like this, not for PK's case apparently. That it does include mainly the same actor. He does act in a lot of movies, but other movies I've noticed usually have other top 250 movies in more like this, that section. So which indicates that people do watch others on the same list. So then I wonder, so I mean, how they could still be so highly rated, unless not many people, I guess, will watch a lot of movies from this list. Maybe some do. Still, if more like this is populated mainly by other top five movies, then that indicates that maybe it's not a small minority that watches a lot on the same list. So I just wonder how the list can be populated by. I mean, in a way, it's good that it has a lot of genres, so no single genre to dominate. So there's variety. But I don't know. I mean, I cannot figure out whether it's just because of a genre, that sometimes I don't seem to agree on the average rating, or or I don't know, I'm missing something that people. I also can see, why it is rated highly. Like in this case, I can see that the movie is clever. So in terms of that, but I wouldn't go so much as rated 8, or some people even rated it 9 since it's 8.3. I mean, personally, I know it might seem very little, but I, yeah, sure enough, I don't know if it's because I've been seeing a lot of stupid movies lately, but I mean, even 6, in my opinion, it did some unnecessary things, in my opinion, that where I can't even give it a 6 because of these unnecessary things, cliched things as well, shall we say. So in other words, not as unique, I mean, the plot, it was clever, so I guess, I cannot possibly give it, 4 or such or less because the plot is clever, but, so I think I'll go with 5, but even that, in comparison, very much less than, you know, I did in the end, I've seen so far. This is the 77th movie I've seen from the top 250. I think it's the first one I thought that I comment on. So yeah, I have seen more over the years, not the majority of them, 30%. Obviously, they differ all the time, and yesterday it was 75 movies I've seen, but some just go down, some go up, I don't know. But yeah, I just sometimes I really don't know why some are. Like take Psycho as an example. Huh? So let's take Psycho as an example. I've seen an entire Psycho franchise, right? For some reason. Yeah, I gotta admit, it has an interesting premise. They focus on psychology without so much, until the very end of the first movie, at least. So not no explicit, mention of psychology, but it is throughout. I mean, overall, even in Bates Motel, it's never too explicit. In terms of the first movie, though, I I do think it's one of those that are overrated, especially in comparison to others in the series. I mean, they're so similar. Well, what is the difference? So the only thing I could conclude is that it's rated highly because it's the first in the series. I don't know. There's some in the same series that are rated uh, an average of 4 by people on average. I mean, I didn't think it was that bad either. The spin-off. I don't know. I don't know if I have my own system, and it could be that I have my own rating system in my head. People have theirs. Obviously, that's very likely. But obviously, it's also likely that it's just relative. I know a few years ago I used to rate things even higher, and now I sort of adjusted for inflation or something. Yeah, I think that's. But it's so strange, isn't it? I mean, some things are just seemingly so highly rated. You know, so we go back to genre, I suppose, and I got to admit, I suppose I don't know if I don't know what would make me rate a crime movie in general really highly, I suppose. So far, I don't think I have though. So maybe it is genre or something. I'm not sure. Maybe if it was a well, that's the thing, right? You know, Clockwork Orange is crime, drama, but also sci-fi. So I suppose maybe it's the combination of genres that, in my mind at least, is better than others. Obviously, some people seem to think that they're fine. But as I say, this thing wasn't, it was fairly common. It's like if I watch any other crime drama, I'd expect something similar, and they're probably not even rated so highly either, but on average by other people. So, in conclusion, if I am to conclude, maybe not, but I am confused indeed. I mean, see for example, like the conversation, it is fairly highly rated, in my opinion. My average rating that is closer than it is for the thing, close to the average rating. That is my rating. That is close to the average. But then again, it's not even it's award winning, etc. But it's not even part of the top 250. So I also don't know what makes people rate something so highly, unless of course it happened to be highly rated at the very beginning. In other words, the mover effect or even the founder effect, because you know it is the conversation is fairly high rated, 7.8. I personally rated it 6. I mean, I thought it was fine, interesting, very interesting, but otherwise fairly common. I mean, not too dissimilar to the Sting. It depicts also the past and such. In my opinion, more interesting because it's about espionage rather than betting. That might have been another factor. I mean, I got to admit, I know so little about horse racing and card games. So I'm assuming maybe people who do like that sort of stuff rated this higher. Yes, I'm assuming they would have. But then again, I mean, like any crime drama, so, I mean, there is crime drama where it's just about murders and such. I'm assuming people haven't committed murders themselves to rate it so highly. I'm assuming. Although in terms of card games and such, obviously people could easily play them. So, but truly, this is bizarre, in my opinion. I mean, what makes a movie have an average rating of 7.8 and another point 0.5 more? Might not be much, but in this case, in this Sting's case, it puts it in this list. Whereas the conversation isn't. I mean, 7.8 is fairly high, a fairly high rating, but it's not, you know, the lowest rated movie in the top 5 list is 8, so that's point 2 less for the conversation. And in my opinion, the conversation was more interesting than this thing, just because it presented a stressed mind, espionage, etc. And it was also clever actually, so it ended in a clever manner, similar to it. Yeah. Even then, with my I don't know if I'd call it, I guess, a stingy way to very ironic, yeah, stingy way to rate movies. Maybe it is, maybe I'm just not too generous as such. Obviously, there is this thing when people rate. I'm assuming everyone does it, but you rate relative to others in the same genre and such. If you've ever seen, otherwise, maybe I do try to rate just the movie itself based on what it does. Because I'm not constantly thinking of other movies at the same time, but sometimes it's inevitable. So the conversation in this case, was more of a mystery than this thing was. Also a thriller, I suppose. But I guess you could say this thing was a bit of a thriller, which is just not officially categorized as a thriller, I guess. Uh, but in my opinion, it was still more interesting. I mean, not very much more interesting. And my average rating is still, I guess, much less than. So yeah, in terms of, even though I was talking about how it's not over 8, despite this thing being, in my opinion, less interesting. Well, I'm not helping the conversation too much, the movie that is, by rating it just 6. But I guess that's just my personal rating in relative to others I've seen, possibly. Not that I had anything in mind really, except perhaps movies like The Lives of Others, which is fairly sort of similar to the conversation, I suppose. But as in contrast, The Lives of Others did make it in top 250, so people liked it more than the conversation. Apparently. So anyway, in conclusion, no, I have no idea what makes people rate some movies. I mean, some of my favorite movies aren't even a top 250 or anything, but some are. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, really. To be expected, I suppose. I mean, something like V for Vendetta was quite excellent, I suppose one can say. But I've liked others that weren't. Something like Altered States is a horror movie. Works quite well, but is rated very poorly on the other hand. Um, but sometimes as I say, I know this list is populated by the ones that are both popular and highly rated. So there are others that are just highly rated but not popular and such. But no, I do not know what makes a movie one or the other. Truly, I do not know. People work in mysterious ways, and either way, I think I've gone on long enough about this. So yeah, this thing was fairly ordinary in my opinion. Clever, but beyond that, eh, you know, didn't go far enough in my opinion. It's uneven at best, and at the beginning it was cliched and it shouldn't have done something. Yeah, it's just honestly, in my opinion, it's not worth 8.3. But I might be focusing too much on a mere number, so I'm just gonna just end it saying that it's ordinary at best. So whatever. Suppose. That's what it is.